Hi everyone, my name is Emily Page Wilson. I'm a poet and I also write novels in verse for young adult readers. And today I wanted to share some books with y'all that I have recently picked up. So, a book haul of sorts. On one hand, I do kind of want to preemptively push back gently on the idea of hauls and feeding into consumerism. But on the other hand, I really love books and I want to share that with y'all. And it's also so important to support indie presses. There are so many people, writers, authors, illustrators, editors, whose work and time and talent go into making books. And so I think supporting indie presses is just, I can't overestimate the importance of that. So I wanted to share some books with you guys that I've picked up and talk about how I acquired them. And essentially, this is kind of like a book haul slash TBR because I hope to read all of them. Um, Plot twist, the first book that I'm going to share I actually have already read. So my apologies, I couldn't wait. But it's Moth Funerals by the poet Gaia Rajan. Now, this was sent to me by the press. It was published this year with Glass Poetry Press. Or this year, 2020. We're in 2021. Last year. Hold on. November 2020. There we go. So it was published last year by Glass Poetry Press. And I'm also on Glass Poetry Press. My chapbook, Hypochondria, Least Powerful of the Greek Gods, came out last year with Glass too. So it was really exciting to be able to pick up Gaia's work and to spend time with a pressmate in this way. Not only does this have just a really beautiful cover, but Gaia's poems are really tightly crafted. There's a series of contrapuntal poems in here entitled Juliet, which I thought were just really well crafted. And the speaker of these poems explores identity a lot and also the precipice of girlhood and womanhood and how that edge is blurred by society. So I thought this was just a really, really beautiful collection of poems, and I highly recommend you guys checking it out and also supporting Glass Poetry Press. It's just a really wonderful press. They do a lot of community building. Tony Frame's the editor. He's a wonderful poet, and he also just gives back to other poets in really meaningful ways. So I highly recommend you check out Moth Funerals, but also just the entire backlist at Glass Poetry. The second poetry chapbook that I have here is Glossary of Unsaid Terms by Victoria C. Flanagan. Again, like this cover art is so stunning. I don't know if you'll get the texture of it. Almost looks like colored pencil. If you can get all of like the ligaments and ligamatures. Ligature is not a word. If you'll get all of the textures that are coming up on this cover, it's really, really stunning. And I actually was part of a reading series, Wednesday night poetry series, hosted by Kai Coggin. And Victoria was on the series the week before I was. So that was the first time I was introduced to her work. I heard her read from this collection. And a cool plot twist is that I found out that she and I have two universities that are the same between us, whether we attended as students or graduate teaching assistants. But also, this chapbook explores health anxiety and conditions of the body and health in general, and that's what my chapbook explores. So I actually, after the reading, reached out to Victoria and said, hey, I thought your reading was really great. I think my work's in conversation with yours. Can I send you a copy of my chapbook? And she said yes, and then sent me a copy of hers. So I highly recommend, if you guys come across a poet whose work spoke to you, reach out to them directly. I can't guarantee you'll get a complimentary chapbook, but I think starting that conversation is really important, and I think a lot of poets would welcome that type of engagement. So I'm really, really excited to read this. It looks really beautiful. Very excited. The third collection that I have here is Inheritance by Taylor Johnson. Now, I went to Oberlin. I did my undergrad at Oberlin with Taylor, and I think the world of them. And I've only just started reading this collection. It came out with Alice James Books, which is also a stunning press as well. You would be well to do if you just picked up a random title from their backlist. They're fantastic. And the inside formatting is really beautiful in this book as well. But Taylor was actually the person who turned me on to meditation, and I can't share with people enough how important that was for me and just for my own sense of self and mental health. So it makes sense that the few poems that I have read in this collection do feel like a meditation on silence and sound. So I'm very interested to be able to dig into this further, and I'm very excited for Taylor. And if you guys pick up this book or any of the books that I'm talking about, or if you've already read them, please feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments. I would love to hear. But this is Inheritance again, and it just came out with Alice James Books. Now this next book of poems is called The Shape of the Keyhole by Denise Bergman. And I'm not familiar with Bergman's work previously. However, this just came out on Black Lawrence Press. And Black Lawrence Press is probably my favorite independent poetry press. You know, to speak in internet memes, take my money. I am in such big trouble when they send me emails with their newsletter telling me like what's on pre-order, because I just want everything they publish. They represent so many fantastic poets. And what stood out to me about The Shape of the Keyhole, I'm just going to read y'all a blurb from the back. In 1650 in Massachusetts, a woman was falsely accused of killing her friend's child. She was immediately tried and soon hanged. The Shape of the Keyhole examines a community's fear-driven silence and envisions the innocent woman's days as she awaits her execution. So the reason I gravitated to that blurb in the back was because the current project I'm working on in poetry is about Marie Lafarge. She was an 18th century French woman who was convicted of poisoning her husband Charles Fruitcake and subsequently murdering him as a result of being conned into a marriage. He promised her that he was wealthy. He wasn't. She maintains her innocence. She passed away, but she maintained her innocence until she died. And I think she's just a really interesting character. Her trial was also the first time that forensic toxicology was used to convict someone of murder. So in writing through her voice, one of the main tensions that I've been working with is, do I think she's innocent? Do I think she isn't? Because I think that there's convincing evidence both ways. And so I was really curious to see how Bergman as a poet treated a historical narrative through verse, through somebody who it seems like, this particular person was probably falsely accused and falsely imprisoned. Not falsely imprisoned, unjustly imprisoned. And so I'm really excited about this. Like I said, Black Lawrence Press, you cannot go wrong. I love them so much. And speaking of another favorite, so this is Black Warrior Review. It's their fall-winter 2020 issue, so 47.1. Black Warrior Review is also my favorite literary journal. I find so many new voices. It's very surreal. Typically, sometimes it leans, I don't want to say dark necessarily. I don't know why, but Karen Russell is the first name that kind of comes to mind in trying to articulate what the vibe and the aesthetic is like. But first of all, just look at how stunning this cover is. They have beautiful art. They always have a chapbook in the back, like a full chapbook of poems in the back. And I just think that that's fantastic. And the editors also pay, well, I can't assume that they do this, but I imagine that they do this because it's so versatile, the forms throughout. I would imagine that they pay really close attention to the works that they select in terms of form and formatting. I'm trying to show you a page that's a good example. So here, I don't know if y'all can see it, but clearly we're playing with white space in interesting ways, but also the color of the font, right? Like this is a lighter gray. It looks kind of ghosted out into the background. There's so many interesting choices that are made visually in Black Warrior Review, issue to issue to issue. I think they just have standout new voices. And this was one of my favorite journals to teach from when I was a graduate teaching assistant. I just think the world of this journal. And so, the other two I did pay for. So the Taylor Johnson and the Denise Bergman I paid for. to support local press and to support those poets. And also Black Warrior Review. I'm pretty sure I just have a subscription because I submit to them every year and submit to their contests. So that's a really good way to support a local literary journal as well. Local, everything's on the internet. To support a small indie journal, if you submit to their contest, a lot of times in return for your submission fee, because sometimes, y'all, let's not lie, they can be pricey, right? Like $20, $25, you often do get a complimentary year-long subscription. So I love this journal so much. I'm very excited to read the next issue. So the last poetry collection I have to share with y'all is Folio by Tahimba Jess. And I'm very excited to read this. I'm a little bit late on the game to this. I think this came out in 2016 with Wave Books. Let me double check that that is the right date. Yeah, 2016, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I'm super excited to read this. I've been meaning to pick it up for a while because while the content isn't necessarily as direct a parallel between the Marie Lafarge project that I'm working on, this still is poetry as witness, poetry as historical documentation. From what I know about the book, we're going to be following along with some characters who are Black musicians right after abolition of slavery in the States. So I know it's very musical, and I'm just really excited to see how this historical period and these characters are going to be drawn out through Jess's writing. I'm really looking forward to this. I got some soot on the cover, which I'm mildly distressed about, but it won't affect the reading experience. And this book I actually won off of Twitter. The Whiting Foundation one time a few months ago was just tweeting that they were doing a giveaway, and so I entered. So follow them on Twitter because sometimes, I mean, they always have really interesting, cool content, but sometimes they give away books. The next 3 books that I'm going to share, I actually picked up from a free library in our neighborhood. We have a free library that is just so good, and I appreciate it so much. I go for walks every day. I always check in. Bless my neighbors, they're doing the Lord's work by just crowdsourcing books like this. It definitely has gotten me through the quarantine when our local library was shut down. I also did find out about the Libby app, but prior to finding out about the Libby app, my local library, my little neighborhood library rather, was where I went every single day. Up from there was There by Tommy Orange. I feel like I'm a little bit behind with this book too. It was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and from what I understand, having just read the first 25 pages this morning and reading through the cast of characters, we're going to examine the journeys of, I think it was like 12 or so characters who are either part of or connected to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. And they are all going to the big Oakland powwow. And this is going to be an exploration of how their narratives all fit together, even if they themselves aren't aware of those connections. And I love intergenerational stories that talk about cultural identity and family identity. I love intergenerational stories like that. Like, I really love Michael Cunningham's The Hours. I love Zadie Smith's White Teeth. So I think this book, There is kind of giving me a similar reading experience. The voice is also incredibly vivid. So I'm really looking forward to being able to spend more time and working my way through There. So I think this is the only nonfiction book that I have, and it's How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I have read some of his long-form essays online, and I have heard him speak. I have not yet, though, read a book by him, so I'm very excited, very appreciative that somebody dropped this off at the neighborhood library. And I think the idea of framing the context of equal rights around anti-racism, to use that language as a lens, is really helpful. I think a lot of white people get defensive and try to use this idea of racist or not racist as a litmus test. But if you're talking about maintaining an anti-racist perspective, then it's really action driven, right? And like what you can do to create a more equitable world. So I'm very excited to be able to spend time with this. It also reminds me of another resource I've been using personally and professionally, the Anti-Racist Starter Kit by L. Glenise Pike, and I'll leave that link down below too, because I think that that language was really helpful in framing the conversation, especially if you're not somebody who's used to initiating conversations around equity and inclusivity. I think that that's a really helpful resource, and I'm excited to have this resource in my wheelhouse as well. And then the final book that I picked up, also from the Little Local Hood Library, is much more of a pleasure read. It's kind of, I imagine it will be a little bit of an escapism experience. It's 9 Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty. So I read Big Little Lies pretty early in quarantine. I think I picked that up at my local library, I'm not quite sure. But that book was a bit of an escapism read for me. Even though it's dealing with really serious topics like domestic abuse, there is a levity and a safety and a sense of support among the female friendships that Moriarty wrote in that book. So I'm pretty much going into this 9 Perfect Strangers with very little information, but I think that that's okay. I think I'm going to enjoy it either way. And so that's the last book that I have to share. So if you pick up any of these, if you've already read them, I would love to hear what you thought about them in the comments below, or you can just tell me what you're reading now. I'm always looking for something new to read, even though I have way too many books, and I really shouldn't be taking any more in. I live in a pretty tiny split duplex, but I still, maybe I'll download them on my Libby app. I still want to hear what you guys are up to and what you're reading and when the last time you supported a local press or journal was. So I look forward to reading your comments, and I hope you guys have a good day.